Hello, everyone. My name is Marielle Fayami, and today I will be presenting my project, Monitoring the Masses, the Supply and Demand of China's Surveillance Technology. So first off, what is surveillance technology? It's essentially a form of information and communication technology, and it includes social media monitoring and surveillance cameras. As you can see here, there are many countries in the world that have surveillance technology. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace estimates that there are over 90. You can also see that the countries also receive their surveillance technology from different places, meaning that they buy them from two major countries, the United States and China. This map highlights countries who get their surveillance technology from the US in blue and China in red, and the multicolor is a mix of both, as you can see by here. Now, scholars have noted that China has been giving surveillance technology to authoritarian regimes, and some hypothesize that China is doing this purposely to try to undermine democracy. However, I don't think that this approach really focuses on the recipient countries and how the recipient countries are going to use it. So that is one thing that I really wanted to study in my research was how the recipient countries use surveillance technology or plan to use it once they receive it. And that is my main question. What is driving the demand of Chinese surveillance technology? So through the literature, there are three main factors that I identified, which are authoritarianism, domestic instability, and development, and I will explain each. First, there's authoritarianism, and as I mentioned previously, some scholars hypothesize that countries who have authoritarian regimes and who are more likely to suppress and surveil their citizens would want a Chinese surveillance technology to be able to monitor their citizens better and protect their regime's legitimacy. Secondly, there's domestic instability. Sheena Greitens, who is a political scientist, noted that Huawei, which is one of the major companies exporting Chinese surveillance technology, markets its technology as a form of preventing crime. For example, when Huawei markets its technology to Latin American countries, it'll focus on drug cartel activity and basically argue that devices like facial recognition and social media monitoring are ways to address the issue of crime in those countries. And finally, there's development, which can be a potential factor in whether a country has Chinese surveillance technology, because China is developing the Belt and Road Initiative, which is essentially a development initiative. And many countries in this initiative are developing nations, meaning that they are middle to low income. They're not fully industrialized yet. And China has been pursuing technological partnerships with these countries. So that can also be, development can also be an indicator as to whether or not a country has surveillance technology because of the Belt and Road Initiative. Now, I want to study the relationship between these three factors and the ownership of surveillance technology in a quantitative way. So I had to find a way to quantify these three factors. I decided to use the Global Peace Index to represent domestic stability. And the Global Peace Index essentially measures the level of internal peace in a country. And then there's the Global Freedom Score, which measures the strength of a country's democracy. It ranks countries as either free, partly free, or not free, with free being fully developed democracies and not free being authoritarian regimes. And finally, for the level of development, I chose a GDP per capita just because it is a common measurement of development in political science. So I thought that would be fitting. So essentially, I used RStudio, which is a statistical software, to see whether these three variables were significant in whether or not a country has Chinese surveillance technology. And I essentially found that the Global Peace Index and the Global Freedom Score were significant, meaning that authoritarianism, the level of authoritarianism in a country, and the level of domestic instability in a country are the two main factors in determining whether it has Chinese surveillance technology. So 66.2% of countries with Chinese surveillance technology are either not free or partly free under the global freedom scores, which essentially means that they are authoritarian regimes. And secondly, countries with Chinese surveillance technology have a higher global peace index on average than countries who do not. And a higher peace index means a higher level of domestic instability. So it essentially seems that countries with Chinese surveillance technology may be buying this technology to either address domestic instability or to limit political freedoms to keep the regime in power. Now, I don't think that every country who has surveillance technology fits under these two categories, but it seems like these are the two major trends that have emerged outside of my research. And now I think this is important because knowing the country's motivations for having surveillance technology, specifically surveillance technology from China, will help to predict future trends in the spread of surveillance technology, and just see which countries are more likely to have surveillance technology in the future, but also understand how these countries plan to use surveillance technology so that as a whole, we will be able to understand the impact of this technology spreading throughout the world. I do think that more qualitative analysis is needed in my project. I'm still working on that. But so far I've found that in terms of domestic instability, there are a few examples of countries buying Chinese surveillance technology to try to address that. Like in South Africa, there are high rates of crime and local police offices have been seeking Chinese surveillance technology to try to alleviate concerns about crime among citizens. And finally, I'd like to thank Professor Eric Min for being my faculty mentor in this project. His guidance was invaluable, and I really learned a lot from him. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Kelly Kistner for guiding me through the beginning of this project because I was in her Research Revealed course in spring 2022. And her advice at the beginning was very helpful in laying the foundation for this project. Thank you for attending.